The fact that Jews are in Judea after thousands of years of the exile. Never before in history has such an ingathering of the exiles happened. It's all a miracle of God, and God tells us clearly what to do in the Torah, in the Bible. He says, Al tashet yadcha im rasha liot ed Hamas. Do not extend your hand, do not join hands with a wicked Hamas. The word Hamas is used. Do not make a covenant with Hamas.
And so we could shake hands with the devil himself, because that's what's happening here. But when Yehia Sinwar was released for the Gilad Shalit deal, he was the architect and the brains behind all of October 7th. He may not have had blood on his hands because he was sitting there behind scheming with Iran and doing that. And what did he say? What was the scheme? The scheme was, it worked with me. We need more hostages.
Right.
And it encourages more kidnappings.
I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
Welcome back to the Israel Guys and the Land of Israel Network, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Wow, there's so much going on right now, specifically with this disastrous hostage deal. And many of you guys are wondering, why are we using the word disastrous? We're talking about 33 hostages most likely coming home. That sounds amazing. But what is behind this? Of course, all of us here at the Israel Guys and the Land of Israel Network want to see every hostage home as soon as possible. That's one of the key elements of this whole war, and we want to see this happen. Of course, there's precious Jewish lives in the hands of the enemy, and that has to be, that's something we want to see change immediately. But how is this being done right now? There's a real sinister scheme going behind the scenes, and we really need to get to the bottom of this. Jeremy Gimpel, Ari, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about it in depth, and maybe it's a lot of stuff that you're not aware of. Jeremy, give us a quick breakdown for everybody that's wondering, what's going on? Why is this disastrous? This sounds amazing.
Well, in some ways, the hostage deal is, in some ways, the end of this war. The Gazans are going back to northern Gaza. 33 out of 98 hostages are being released, but that means that there's a lot of hostages that are still being held. And after all that we've fought since October 7th, I mean, the stats are 840 soldiers have fallen. 917 civilians have been murdered and killed. 777 police officers and security agents in Israel. I mean, we've lost so much. And now to bow our knee to this evil, tyrannical Hamas barbaric organization is a hit to the country.
Explain that more, though, because I don't think people are understanding. Maybe Ari, take this. Why are we saying that's a bow? Why are we saying this is a bow? Because outside looking in, we're getting some life out of this trap. What's the bow? What are we losing, and what's behind the scenes here that is causing this to be this is a bad thing that we're saying is disastrous?
First of all, I think there's presented often this false binary. They're saying either, you don't want to release the hostages if you're against this disastrous deal? And the answer is, no, it's not that you don't want to, you want them to be released, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. Is that the term?
Yeah, that's how you say it in Tennessee.
That's how you say it in Tennessee.
That's
so
right.
We don't skin cats in Judea.
No, it's not kosher.
But no, but the idea is, where's this false binary? There's more than one way to release those hostages. We could go to the Hamas terrorists with blood on their hands that we have in our prisons and publicly broadcast to all of Gaza as we execute them in a humiliating way in front of all of them and say, for every hour that goes by, another one will be executed until they are all released.
You sound like a Middle Eastern here.
Well, this is the language that they speak.
Yeah.
This is not the natural native tongue of the Jewish people. Our prayers throughout the day are for peace, are for brotherhood of all of mankind. My dream and aspiration of the Messianic era is to be offering sacrifices to God with them in the courtyard of the temple. But if they are going to act in such a perversely sick, torturous, evil way, then we need to do what we need to do for justice. So that's number one. There's this false binary, but there's also the fact that we need to zoom out a little bit and understand that the fact we're here in Israel, the fact that Jews are in Judea after thousands of years of the exile, never before in history has such an ingathering of the exiles happened. It's all a miracle of God, and God tells us clearly what to do in the Torah, in the Bible. He says, Al tashet yadcha im rasha liot ed Hamas. Do not extend your hand. Do not join hands with a wicked Hamas. The word Hamas is used. Do not make a covenant with Hamas. You shall not make a covenant with them and their gods when you enter the land. This is in the book of Exodus. He's telling us, I will bring you back to the land, and when I do, don't shake the hands of evil.
It's even worse than shaking the hands of evil. It's a release of murderous terrorists in mass.
That's the point. That's the point, is that they're releasing terrorists in this deal. And that's the point that we're saying is disastrous.
And
why is this disastrous on that level?
And their moral ambiguity. The world is like, okay, they're releasing 33 and you're releasing however many hundreds. No, wait a second. We're talking about 33 innocent men, women, and children versus people who have slit the throats of babies in their cribs. To create that sort of moral equivalence is insane and blind and sick and evil.
So we're talking about 1,650 terrorists being released so that the 33, that's not all the hostages, right? You just said 98 hostages are still in Gaza, and only 33 of them are going to come out. Meanwhile, the politicians are voting to release 1,650 terrorists. This is what we're saying is disastrous. Why is that disastrous, Jeremy, in your mind, to release these terrorists these are terrorists, meaning they're not just some sort of prisoner for some reason, they literally have blood on their hands.
This is a quote from Winston Churchill. You were given a choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you will have war. And so we could shake hands with the devil himself, because that's what's happening here. And we can try to do some sort of negotiating deal. But when we release terrorists into Israel, we've seen what happens. They don't stop. They don't repent. They will be right back at the necks of Jews doing terrorism the very next day. On the contrary, they've just been emboldened to kill that many more.
Yeah.
And so
we have facts on this. I mean, Israel is not new today. It's a new country, but not that new. We've already had experiences with the first Intifada in 1985. There was hostages and hostage deals all the way back to then. There was prisoner releases that happened all the way back then with soldiers that were killed, or wherever it was that they had these bodies or whatever. The problems that were on the scene all the way back to then had these deals that started going on where they would release massive amounts of prisoners of war that were murderers, right, from all whatever war it was. In the first Intifada, the second Intifada, the Oslo Accords time, the 2000s where it was the Intifadas there of 2000, all of these times, and then as of recent of October 7th, all of these different times have had massive amounts of prisoner releases from Israel. And here's the thing I want everyone to be clear about. What's actually happened here. We have from those releases that equates to about 12,000 released terrorists. That's a lot throughout the year since 85. 12,000.
I mean, you could list the whole thing from Oslo to the Tannenbaum affair to the Shalit deal.
Yeah. Each one of these that were throughout these wars. So you have 12,000 roughly released terrorists. These terrorists, and this is the point that no one knows and why this is disastrous, these terrorists committed mass crime against Israel, so much so that it took the lives of 2,750 Israelis. That's what that equates to. So when we give a deal and we're saying, okay, we want these 33 back, if we take this standard, what the math is, and it's terrible to use math when we're talking about human life, but the math is that if you release 1,650 terrorists to save 33, those terrorists you release statistically will kill another 380 Israelis.
Oh, wow.
And that is what is blowing our mind. And like everybody's screaming, Israel across the board is screaming right now, stop, there's a better way. If you release, I mean, Sinwar himself was a released terrorist, right?
That's right,
Exactly.
in the Shalit deal. Sinwar himself, and we're continuing this path. And we're such like a pragmatic people.
Yeah.
What about justice? Justice you shall pursue. That's just a very simple. It is not justice to release terrorists with blood on their hands.
Here's what I'm thinking. We've got the Trump administration saying peace through strength.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're right now they're all saying peace through strength. Told you it would work. Look, we're already getting hostages out. Is that a fib or what?
Well, I think that most Israelis say when they heard Trump say, all hell is going to break loose if you don't release the hostages, they're like, phew. I don't think they realized that he may have been talking to Netanyahu.
Yeah.
That he may have been talking, and I think there's a little bit of a cynical but possibly very real dimension to this, that why is this going through now? Because Israel is being pressured by the Trump administration that wants to strike a deal. And in that way, we have only ourselves to blame. Yeah. We have to liberate ourselves from this psychology of always blaming everyone else and feeling like a victim and feeling smaller than. We have to take ownership. And I think in some way, the Biden administration has taught us how to stand up to our adversaries, to our enemies, because they were arms embargoing us. They were turning against us, doing everything they could to keep us from winning that war. And we could go into higher resolution, but it's just true. But now I think the Trump administration is going to teach us how to stand up to friends, which is a greater challenge for Israel than standing up to enemies.
Well, I want to say something about the numbers, meaning we release terrorists that will, without a doubt, incur more Jewish death. So many soldiers have already died. But when Yahya Sinwar was released for the Gilad Shalit deal, he was the architect and the brains behind all of October 7th. He may not have had blood on his hands because he was sitting there behind scheming with Iran and doing that. And what did he say? What was the scheme? The scheme was, it worked with me. We need more hostages.
Right.
And it encourages more kidnappings. If we put an end to it and said there's no dealing with terrorism, terrorism needs to be destroyed, then there's no deal to be had with the devil.
We're just incentivizing further kidnappings.
And so I want to learn something like principled here, meaning in the past, evil manifested itself as the Nazis, and they would kill innocent babies, women, children. They would just kill according to what they wanted to kill. And then there was a philosophy that wasn't a Jewish philosophy. It wasn't a biblical philosophy. There were people that said, Chamberlain, let's just make a deal. Let's cut a deal. Maybe he'll just take this. Maybe we'll just do that. We'll let the Gazans return to northern Gaza. And what is the philosophical underpinnings between right and left, between people that are happy with this hostage deal, between people that are disgusted by this hostage deal? And I think that it boils down to the inability for the left or for Chamberlain or for really well-hearted people to recognize evil. They don't really want to call evil evil. That we are such a people of love and such a people of life. They don't realize that the win for this evil is the more chaos, the more death, the more destruction. That's all that they want. If you release them, they will only bring more death and destruction. So there's no deal with the devil. You can't deal with evil. You can only destroy evil.
Especially this evil, the murder and the terror of these jihadists. It's not a means to an end. Everyone's like, oh, it's a nationalistic aspiration. It's not a national. It is an end in and of itself. The more horrific the torture and pain inflicted, the greater the act of worship it is for them. It's a worship in and of itself. And the West is just there's a little bit of an arrogance there where they project their value system and their worldview on the rest of the world, and they insist on making everything about either national aspirations or materialism without understanding actually it is the pathology of millions of people, of these jihadists, and what they're really about.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I really like the new Secretary of Defense of the United States of America.
Well, and I'm also seeing a little inconsistency here too, though. I love what we're seeing on the front is strong, and I want to play this clip and we can talk about it more. But I'm seeing a massive inconsistency, what's being portrayed, and then what's coming down here on the land of Israel. I want to talk about that more, but let's watch this clip. This is clip 3, guys. Can we play that?
Another protester, and I think this one was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
So to me, this is amazing. You have not only Senator Tom Cotton, who's an awesome guy, and we love him, and everything he's done for Israel is amazing, but we have this new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who is saying some pretty awesome things here. He's saying, number one, he's a Christian. So that means he's Bible based, right? And that Zionism that he also attested to, that he does support. And then he's saying he wants to wipe out Hamas, and even explicitly saying every single one of them should be done. How is this translating? Because what we see right now is the Trump administration is taking a lot of credit for this deal that went down behind the scenes. Obviously, he's not even in power yet, but he's saying this was Trump's really. He was the one behind the scenes on this deal, pushing for all of the facets that were going on behind the scenes. How does this seems a little bit inconsistent with what's actually being said from the Secretary of Defense? I mean, what do you guys have thoughts on this? This is what I'm seeing, but what are you seeing? Something different?
This is the one hope that I have, that I'm not spending all day curled up in a ball and depressed, that Israel is just bowing before the Hamas and releasing these terrorists. When I hear that from a Navy SEAL, who's now the Secretary of Defense, this administration, I believe, must have something up its sleeve. Israel planted beepers 10 years earlier before they went beep and pretty much eradicated all the leadership of the Hezbollah. And I'm just wondering if someone who believes in the Bible very much recognizes good and evil. He realizes that all these terrorists are absolutely evil, committed to evil, and evil needs to be killed. Every last single one of them was his quote. So I think that there must be a larger plan that will unfold.
I certainly hope that's true, but I
can tell you are like not feeling the same way about this.
Right. I can't help but to think about when Reagan took over for Carter, and what it was a day before, hours before Iran released the hostages, because Reagan said there better not be any hostages, and it was very clear that he wasn't going to. That was a threat, a direct threat. And for me, in my mind, Trump is a potentially a great leader. He was great the first time. So many people in Israel so excited to the degree where I was alarmed and alerted by it, because it felt like we were running the risk of falling to the same stumbling block that we fell to in the past, of rather than looking at the American administration as allies. We are going to fall back into the old state of mind of being a codependent vassal state that really takes our orders from them. Meaning, is Trump the administration going to be a blessing for Israel? It's up to us.
Right.
Ultimately, it's up to us to decide if we're going to have a healthy eye-to-eye we're allies and we're friends and we share values. But if we are demanded to do something that is evil or wrong or not in our interest as a nation, we have to be able to stand up to Trump no differently than anyone else.
So you're kind of outlining now what should happen, because we've talked about what's happening and how it's bad, and like this is not good. We need a peace through strength, which is actually what's being broadcasted through Pete Hegseth here, what Trump's saying, what Trump's team is saying. They're saying peace through strength, and we're saying this deal that's going down right now is not through strength. This is through actually empowering Hamas to continue. And that's not wiping out Hamas.
When we say it's disastrous, you can tell it's disastrous because last night we heard in our mountaintop in Judea, Bethlehem is right over the mountains near us, firecrackers going off and parties and celebrating. There was not one party, one celebration in Israel. Even the families of the hostages themselves, I'm sure, are very relieved. But they also know the cost here, the gravity here, what this will cost the nation of Israel in spilled blood. That's a real thing. So who's celebrating and who's not? That's a good sign of what this is about. Are jihadist terrorist murders celebrating? Absolutely.
And that's very clear around here as well. I hope that somehow this is being communicated back to the Trump administration. I don't know that it is. I think that because of the international media, which is not represented here on this show, everybody else is thinking this is amazing. That on the international stage, the media across the board is all saying this is amazing. We're finally getting a breakthrough. And that's their stance, but they're covering up a mass amount of problems with this. And I think that's what we're trying to tell the world right now is, no, this is not good for Israel. There's a way to get those precious lives that are in the dungeons of Gaza out without releasing a bunch of people with blood on their hands. And that's what we're like, you can't this is not somewhere to deal. President Trump, please stop dealing. What we're saying, don't deal with these arch enemies and these brutes that have caused such a terrible disaster within Israel that we can't even describe how terrible this is. Don't make a deal with them. Destroy them. And that's what he's saying publicly, but that's not what's happening on the ground. So we're trying to hold a little accountability here, saying, no, we've got to straighten this out. And what do you? I guess the big thing is we need to say what needs to happen. That's
well, I think it's important to understand, I think a little biblically, historically, to zoom out again and to understand what happened on October 7th. It was a massive defibrillator to the heart of the nation of Israel. And we are waking up. We're in a process of waking up and coming to ourselves. And listen, how did the nation of Israel in the land of Israel end? What happened was there was King Solomon, and then he had a son, and the son took bad advice, and then the tribes to the north and the tribes to the south and the tribes to the north had idolatry, and there was idolatry plaguing the people. And now we're returning in exactly that way, and we're facing the same idolatry. And this is our opportunity since waking up, where we're starting to systematically shatter our idols, to disabuse ourselves of the illusions of having faith in flesh and blood and putting our trust in man. And so we are unfortunately, I think we're going to have to learn still more lessons the hard way, through the spilled blood of understanding. Just because Trump has the potential to be a great leader and a real friend doesn't mean that we need to bow head and bend knee and do everything that he needs to say. That's the heart.
So how do we do this right, though? How do we do it right? What do we ask them for? You got something else?
Yeah, I just think it's really important to note, because it wasn't just the celebrations of Bethlehem that we heard, and it wasn't just the celebrations around the villages here in Judea and Samaria, but Hamas itself came out celebrating.
Yeah.
Iran came out celebrating. The Houthis came out celebrating. So to realize that all of the bad guys, and what does it mean, bad guys? You need to understand, who are the Houthis?
Yeah.
The Houthis, their flag, what is their banner? It literally says, Allah is great, death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews. That's their banner.
That's on their flag.
That's their flag. That's their banner. That's what they're about. Is there any other people in the world that has random countries in other places that their entire motivation, their entire identity is death to America, death to Israel, curse the Jews? And if those people are celebrating this hostage deal, you need to know that it must be wrong. And it's not a war against the Jews in the Arab world, or even Jews against the Muslim world. I want you to look at this video clip here, because this explains it all. You see that, and you realize the indoctrination is so deep. We need to eradicate the culture of evil, the culture of jihad. And this is now encouraging, as if the jihadists are winning. We captured them, but they're being released to only continue it more and more. It's a war of values, and that's one of the reasons why I like Pete Hegseth so much. I'll tell you a story. I met him for the first time on the Arugot farm in Judea, and he came out and he spent the whole day, and we were just talking about the Bible, talking about King David, talking about God, talking about the land of Israel. And I know that when he went back to the United States of America, he actually tattooed, because he has a lot of tattoos because he's a Navy SEAL, he tattooed Hebrew letters on his right arm, realizing that he doesn't have Judeo-Christian values. I mean, that's a beautiful thing of love and peace, but there's also Judea-Christian values. And that's what he's aiming towards. And it's not just Western democracy and freedom for all and love everyone goes. And no. He had Judea Christian values, and that's a little bit more like a Navy SEAL, and that's a little bit more like King David. And we need to react the way King David would react when dealing with these Hamas terrorists, because those little children are younger than Davash, Ari. They're younger than your daughter, and you can imagine the indoctrination of the Nerf. My kids play Nerf basketball. Here they're doing Nerf rocket-propelled grenades and rocket launchers, teaching them from the beginning, death to America. death to Israel, curse the Jews.
That's right. And I'll tell you, a lot of these terrorists, what do you hear from day one and throughout their lives? What do they want more than anything? To be shaheeds,
Right.
to be martyrs. Who are you to say no to that? I am willing to help make that happen. That needs to happen because, Jeremy, when you said we need to eradicate the culture, I'm not exactly sure what you meant, but I know that a lot of times Western thinking is like we got to get into their schools and change their textbooks. Come on.
Well, you even see that coming a little bit from the States right now.
Yeah,
You see that.
but
we're going to rebuild Gaza with some good education.
With good
systems.
education,
Yeah.
as if it's just an issue of their curriculum. And this doesn't
I heard
go
Elon
back
Musk even say that the other day on
thousands
a
of
TED
years
Talk or
to
something.
even like spiritual
Yeah.
predispositions from Ishmael.
Yeah.
You know, we have to understand the depth of what this is. And the only way to really change the culture is by uprooting it and proving it wrong. And how do you prove it wrong? Well, if Allah is the ultimate God and Islam is the ultimate truth, then the more they're expanding, the more they're being fortified in that belief.
Yeah.
But when they are defeated, and we are going into Gaza and we settle it with Jewish settlement. Then they're, wait a second, this little nation of Israel is defeating us. And then we say, you have to understand why we're winning, because Allah is with us, not with you.
You know, it's much deeper than that, Ari. It's much deeper than that. In fact, the only promise made in the Bible to Abraham, then to Isaac, and then to Jacob is that one day the Jewish people will live in this land. And as long as we are living in this land, we are a living testimony that God is alive and well and that he's guiding the world. It's the only promise. And so the battle right now really defines good and evil, meaning this is the courtyard. This is the playing field. The battle of good and evil is happening exactly on this land because God's promise is on this land. And so every force, whether they be woke, liberal, I don't know what, from San Francisco that want to kick the Jews out of the land of Israel, to kick the Jews out of Judea as they're fighting for indigenous rights, or they want to be the Hamas that are coming and trying to destroy us and terrorize us. Evil is trying to stop the one promise God made in the Bible to the people of Israel. And if we are here, we are the testimony that the EU doesn't run the world and that Trump doesn't run the world. God runs the world.
That's right. And I think we need to also take responsibility vis-a-vis America and understand that I think that Trump really is a friend to Israel.
Yeah.
And he doesn't understand the depth and the dimension of what is really happening here. That really by doing this, by pushing this deal through, there will be American blood on his hands. American blood.
Right.
Why? In America, domestically in America, because after October 7th, Western thinking is, well, if you're a victim, then people like you. And then, no. After October 7th, Jews around the world were in an unparalleled state of fear, of alienation. And a real practical attacks on Jews around the world went up exponentially after October 7th. You'd think it would be the reverse. No, when Israel is weak, every Jew is weakened. And so right now, the jihad has been emboldened. And this emboldens their attack against everyone, Americans included. And this is going to encourage further terrorist attacks in America on American soil.
This reminds me of something really identical to what happened to the last round in the Trump former government, where they released the deal of the century, and they put down a whole idea that they could create a sanction off a portion of the land for Jews, and then section off a part for Arabs over here, and that whole deal. You guys remember that?
Of course.
And that was the first part of the administration went down that way. And then something happened. It changed because Israel is saying this is not going to work. Israel stood up then, right? Because the Trump administration was plowing straight ahead into creating an Arab state, basically, in the heart of Israel. And they thought that that was just the only solution, because that was the solution that Trump had been handed down from every president before him since Israel's creation, basically, was saying this since 1967. And then it changed. And why did it change? Well, I think David Friedman had a lot to do with why it changed. Ambassador Friedman at the time had the Jewish mindset of what needed to happen. And then he also had a lot of backing here in Israel that this was not going to work. And Israel stood up and said, hey, you know what? Let's take all the good that you've out of all of this and let's put it into the Abraham Accords. And then it shifted. You saw that, right? It all shifted to the Abraham Accords. This whole mess that was created here, your farms, all the farms that we work on, were included in those maps that were drawn out here. And it was giving us a lot of encouragement to say, hey, well, we're making a difference here, but this thing is not going to work. And then it shifted over into a whole different thing. What I see happening right now is Trump starting out on a bad foot yet again on this angle, saying, hey, this is what we should do. And he's still got that the log of how this should be done with the other narrative. And that's the problem. He needs the Pete Hegseth voice needs to be a little higher. That biblical voice, the Huckabee voice to Trump needs to be a little bit more. And the voice to everybody that's listening also needs to understand that they have a big impact on this as well. I think the reason why Trump did not go ahead with the plan to create an Arab state and to sanction off these areas, Jewish enclaves, as they were called in the plan, was because our voices got really loud. And we said, this is unacceptable.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I actually may be wrong here. From what I understood was that was going forward. It was called the Trump Peace Plan or the Peace to Prosperity, vision to improve the lives of the Palestinian and Israeli people.
That's right.
It was called both of those. But from what I understood, it actually stopped because he wasn't reelected. It was still in.
Was that right?
It was still in motion. That was his plan to move forward. And they were solidifying it and they were concretizing it. And it was happening in parallel with the Abraham Accords. I guess in the comments, we'll see.
We'll find out who's
We'll find out who's right there.
I just know that the Abraham Accords took the steam and it was kind of dropped off over here because this wasn't working. Right?
Okay, well,
that was the way it was felt here.
That wasn't the way I remembered it, but I actually I remember thinking when he was not reelected that may have been a secret blessing for him, because now his legacy was the Golan, was the embassy, defunding UNRWA. It was net goodness.
Awesome. Yeah.
It was awesome. And he didn't have a chance yet to come to Israel and say, look, Israel, I've been the best president that Israel's ever had, friendship-wise. You got to meet me halfway here. That's our Achilles heel.
Yeah.
That argument against a friend has the ability to cause Israel to do greater damage. Also, when you look at Israel giving away land, it's never been under the Obamas. It's always been under the Bushes. Yeah. It's always been under the friend and the ally that we actually surrender our land to jihadists because of their pressure. Every time.
I have a word of hope.
Help us, Jeremy.
I have a word of hope. And the hope is that Israel has been trying for the last 30 years to give away the land of Israel. And it's always been our enemies that God has hardened their hearts and not allowed us to do the unthinkable and the stupid. And so this hostage deal, we're mourning it right now, and it's very sad, but I still have hope that the Hamas are going to ruin it. And then Trump and Netanyahu have every excuse known to man to go in and do. We have the excuse now to do what needs to be done.
No, but this thinking of the excuse. I remember when the disengagement, when I was personally carried out, you could look up Ari Abramowitz Gaza disengagement. 8 of my fellow IDF soldiers had to pick me up. 8 because I was not yet on the Judean diet. But they had to pick me up and carry me out. They had to carry me out. But I remember everyone saying, but once we do this, we're ethnically cleansing Jews from the land of Israel. We're giving it to jihadist terrorists. It was empty, a barren, desolate desert. And now 60% of the organic exports, that's all true. But if they don't make it into a Singapore of the Middle East, if they launch even one missile at us, then we'll have every excuse in the world. I don't ever want to hear the words, we'll have every excuse in the world. We already do.
I want to give another word of hope. And this is from
Make it a better word of hope. And that
better.
Same fly is here from last week.
Is it still here?
This is from my dear friend, a man that I truly admire, whose name is on the embassy in Jerusalem, and that's former Ambassador David Friedman.
Very much.
He just put out a statement today, which gives me hope that there's something happening behind the scenes, like maybe beepers have been planted 10 years ago, and Netanyahu and Trump have some sort of bigger picture that I just can't see right now. And this is what he wrote. Since October 7th, 2023, Israel has become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Middle East. While there is significant mop-up work ahead, there is no doubt that Israel has beaten Hamas and Hezbollah, sanitized Syria, and humiliated Iran. From this position of undeniable and God-given strength, Israel can afford to overbid for the hostages. No, it's not a great deal, but it's what winners do when they really want something. Hamas can celebrate all they want. In 2025, it will enter the dustbin of history. Those terrorists lucky enough to be freed and offloaded to other countries will need to lay low. If they re-engage, they won't last long. Israel has demonstrated that its reach is without limits in its effort to protect its citizens. Israel is far stronger than it was on October 6th. We all commit that October 7th was a never again moment. Israel has won much, and it will have the ultimate victory with God's help. And so I hear that, and I'm thinking maybe There is a bigger plan here to eradicate the Hamas, every last one of them, even if they're released after this hostage deal. Maybe they're released with a beeper inside their stomach. And at one point, maybe they'll all be taken out. Who knows? I just believe that Netanyahu and Trump are so sophisticated and long thinking that there must be a plan here that can give us a little bit of light of hope. And if not, we can always rely on the Hamas that they're going to ruin the deal for themselves.
Well, I'm thinking the same thing. I don't know about what they're going to do, but it doesn't seem like the governments that we've been dealing with this whole war, that they're going to be able to accomplish something like that. It's very hopeful that you would think that they still have a plan to take it out. I don't necessarily see that. What I do 100% see with you is that God, he mentioned God in that thing, and I think that's obviously the greatest thing that Israel has where God comes into the story every time throughout Jewish history is the hardening of the heart part. When I see what's going on, I see that Israel many, many times makes the wrong mistake, but yet the outcome is good in the end somehow. And it's not because of good decision making, and we see that clearly through a lot of circumstances. When I saw, honestly, I had the same exact thoughts you do about the Arab world ruining it. Israel hands it to them on a silver platter. You want your state? Here's your state.
Right.
And then they reject it. Here, take all these empty the prisons, hand them back to them, and then they all come back to jail. Like every time they ruin whatever you give them. And when I saw Turkey come around and say, Israel, you get out of Syria now, or there's going to be hell to pay, basically something like that, right? You saw that yesterday, I think it came across. I was like, I got a feeling like something big is about to happen somewhere. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's probably going to have to do with a lot of Arab world going nuts. And this kind of stuff is not going to go down very well. And America is either going to stand with Israel against this massive onslaught against Israel that's still forming. It's not over yet. You guys agree with me? It's not over. And it's more like it's like
started.
It hasn't
even started.
That's the feeling I get. Everybody's thinking, oh, the war's about over. I'm not getting that sense. It could happen. But it only means that they're kicking it down the road to continue much bigger later on. That's my feeling.
Well, this is brought back into my comfort zone because you mentioned God and David Friedman mentioned God. Yeah. And I have a lot of hope in the United States of America now because America had a choice. And there are two ways in Hebrew to say America. You can say Amrika, that's how which literally in Hebrew means a nation of emptiness. Mm. And the Hebrew official title of the United States is Aratzot Habrit, the lands of the covenant, which isn't even a translation. It should be Aratzot HaMeuchadot, the United States of America. But for some reason, Israel calls America the lands of the covenant. And what does that mean? One nation under God with liberty and justice for all. And in these last elections, it seems like the real America came out and chose to be aligned with the covenant. And so I believe that right now a new alliance is being born, one that we've never seen before, with a Secretary of Defense that loves God, that believes in the Bible. The ambassador to Israel was a pastor before he became the governor. And now we have an entire people of Israel that have like woken up. And I think that this is no longer going to be about, well, Jewish and Christian, and it's going to be about God. It's going to be about the good, because the war is good versus jihad, because jihad is the evil of this world in this generation.
Well, I certainly hope that you guys are right, that there's some sort of greater plan and maneuver and whatever. But I'm also just a simple-minded Jew. I'm not so sophisticated in my thinking. And sometimes I think that's an asset, that, if you're so open-minded, your brains fall out. At a certain point, you have to say, if you are letting out hundreds of terrorists that have slaughtered babies, killed innocent people, I don't care what the long plan is. God doesn't need our favors. But you're right. It does say in chapter 21 of Proverbs, the king's heart is like a stream of water directed by God. He guides it wherever he pleases. What's happening now is what's supposed to be happening. It's supposed to be playing out. But now it's up to us how we respond to it, how we grow from it, how we react to it. That's in our hands. Yeah. And so I think that's why this conversation is such an important conversation to be having right now. It's the conversation.
Right. And to get that peace through strength, it seems to be like a biblical thing based on those Bible Christian Judea. I love how you said that. Judea Christian values that was rooted in Bible principle. You get peace. This is a very biblical thing by being strong. Very, very actually. Maybe that was learned through people like
King David.
Yeah, King David and like these biblical characters were like, no, you just don't mess with us because it's not going to go well for you because we're standing on more than just me. This is God's promise to us, and we're going to achieve that promise. I want to say something.
Okay.
Go ahead. No,
I just need to say, Jeremy just sparked something in my mind that may be.
This is always good when that happens.
May be a new thing.
Okay.
Right? Because I've been thinking about it. I would say in whose name the idea was planted in my head just yesterday, but there needs to be some sort of room for an alliance that's almost happening here at this table, because the Judeo-Christian alliance, well, we see J Street and we see far left-leaning Jews in America.
What does that even mean?
Let me explain. Far left-leaning Jews in America, where the religion of Judaism, under thousands of years of diaspora and exile, has been so twisted and distorted and liberalized that it barely even has any resemblance to authentic Judean Torah values, that there actually needs to be because Trump is getting a lot of pressure from Jews in America that he's too left on things. I mean, I'm sorry, too far to the right. Even on something like this, he should be giving it back more and he should be releasing more. The point is that there needs to be a real alliance and clarity of Judean Christian values.
Yeah. Well, I think we're seeing it happen. I think I want to play another clip that really actually points exactly to what you're talking about. And this clip is with Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. And it's really interesting because they say something in here that's going to point to what you're talking about here, but also point to another big situation that we're going to discuss a little bit. Let's play that clip real quick and we'll get right onto the same topic here.
Can you commit to ending anti-terrorism sanctions waivers related to Palestinian terrorism and implementing sanctions against those terrorists?
Yes.
Can you commit to ending discriminatory policies, including Biden administration's secret boycott policies against Jews in Judea and Samaria?
Yes.
And can you commit to reversing the discriminatory sanctions against Jews living in Judea and Samaria?
Again, yes. I think that the policy of it, again, without speaking out of turn, I'm confident in saying that President Trump's administration will continue to be perhaps the most pro-Israel administration in American history.
Okay, so where this comes to the Judea Christian values is that he's saying Judea. I mean, when did you ever hear somebody from the place of power in America, and that's Senator Ted Cruz, is telling us that it's Judea, folks? And he's using that with the Secretary of State. That's powerful to me. We have, these other. It's becoming a thing within the Congress, within the Senate. It's become a thing within the powers of America that they're saying, wait, we're not going with this narrative that was replaced in 64 by an organization that was attempting to destroy the Jewish connection to Judea, and that was just like the Romans were trying to do. We had a new attempt at trying to destroy the Jewish, and that's what is happening in our age. Is this PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, wanted to come in and rid, just like the Romans did, Jewish connections to Judea, so much so that they wanted to go with the same idea that the Romans did, rename it, and then everybody will forget about it. Well, it didn't work with the Romans 2,000 years ago, and it's not working now with the Palestinians to try to rename and recreate all the education and all the things and what's going down here. So that's the Judean front, is our power in America is understanding the actual history of what's at play here as Judeans, and our value dated all the way back in thousands and thousands of years of history. And then, which I think you guys are probably going to have something to say about that, which is so amazing that we're getting to the Judea and Samaria, the actual names, biblical names of this area. And then to the topic of what they were talking about in the right context now is extremely impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I hear Hegseth and Rubio, and then I see the pressure from the Trump administration on Bibi, I'm seeing the polarized potential of how this administration could be potentially disastrous or potentially the best thing that has ever happened to Israel as far as the American-Israel relationship and creating a stronger world for all of freedom and humanity. Both options are right there, and it's really up for Israel, us, to determine which side we want to empower by empowering ourselves.
Because they can't do it by themselves. They're going to have somebody here that pushes it, and maybe we're going to be a part of that team. I don't know. I think you two definitely will be a part of that team of helping to steer this in the right direction, stand up and with voices to say, hey, you're right. senators. You're right, congressman. That's what Israel needs. And they need to hear that because there's voices in Israel that are telling them otherwise.
I mean, just so you're aware, so our viewers are aware of all of this, the Biden administration took sanctions away from the Iranian regime that was developing nuclear weapons to destroy humanity, and they replaced those with billions of dollars that they gave to Iran, and they took those sanctions because something needed to happen to them, and they put them on innocent farmers in Judea and Samaria, been accused of nothing, done nothing wrong. I used to think sanctions were an economic punitive measure to prevent a nation from going rogue. No. A farmer in Judea, Yossi Goldstein, in Samaria, that has a sheep farmer, and all of a sudden, his bank account is frozen, and he has no access to any of his money at all. Why? No response.
The craziest thing in my
reason.
mind is that now the Secretary of State is talking about it.
Yeah,
And he's talking about Judean farmers. How in the world did a Judean farmer get up on this list of things to even talk about now? So I'm encouraged that these values that are rooted deeply in this incoming administration are going to actually benefit. And I'm with you, Jeremy. There's hope that through these kind of things, we're going to see some powerful things, that we're going to see some movement forward. And we just need to be a part of it to help make sure that it's in the right vein. If it's biblical and it's Judean, it's going to be amazing.
Exactly. It's all about values. And so right now, there's sort of like, it's worked. There's like the Allah Akbar while committing murder. I think it's the only religion in the world that will praise their God while committing murder. And that's one type of value. And then there is also this Western Judeo-Christian, whatever they want to call it. I don't like that terminology because what is Jewish exactly? There's Reformed Jews. There's Democratic voting Jews. What is Christian? Is it Catholic? Is it Christian? It's just kind of an amorphous term, which kind of means like peace and love and like, no, not violence. We're not murdering in the name of our values. And what's being demanded now is really understanding what are our biblical values. And our biblical values are rooted in the land of Israel. And that's why what the world needs and what's being shown here are Judean Christian values by these Christian leaders in America now. And I think that as long as everything always goes back to the Bible, goes back to the Torah, that will be a blessed way forward. And we're going to be forced down that path one way or the other. Either we can choose to walk down that path or, God forbid, we'll release terrorists and then we'll be forced down that path.
That's right. Where are we right now? Where are we broadcasting from? Har Bracha, the mountain of the blessing. God says, I will place before you a blessing and a curse. I will place before you life and death. Choose life. That is the option right now, quite literally, that the state of Israel, that the nation of Israel has right now. Are we going to choose life?
And most people in the modern world are saying, choose life would be to release the hostages today, get these 33. But it's not, right?
That's
what
the hard peace now is what's now, but there's no bigger picture, no vision of the future of what the ramifications will be. But I do want to end with a positive note of Torah.
This is your job.
This is the most beautiful thing because we're talking about the hostages being released and we're entering into the Torah portion of us being in captivity and about the exodus of Egypt. That's what this book is about, the book of Exodus. It's all about us fighting for our freedom and our own liberation. And there are beautiful stories how the children were going to be murdered by Pharaoh. And the Jewish women kept on having children nonetheless. And of course, that reigns all throughout history because we talk about blessing. It's all children. The more children, the more blessing. The more life, the more blessing. By the enemies, the more death. That's how they worship. We worship with more life. And I think about how hard it must have been in Egypt to have a child that you know might be thrown into the Nile, or to have a child in Auschwitz where if that baby cries too loud, the Nazis are going to find him. And yet still the Jewish people never gave up. In a statistic released just this week was that the last quarter of 2024, Israel had a baby boom. And that means that right after October 7th, there was baby making happening in the land of Israel. In the last quarter of 2024, all of a sudden there were babies everywhere. And so in the midst of war, in the midst of chaos and terror and war, and this existential threat posed to Israel, the Jews are like, nope, we're in Egypt and we're going to keep on having babies because we're here to bring life to the world.
The more they oppressed them, the more they grew. That's the Exodus story. What an incredible way to end, that the land of Israel is moving forward. Even through the troubles, there is light and there's hope and we all believe in the light and hope that is coming forth from Israel. And we're here to broadcast that to you guys. And I hope this has been educational to all of you in regards to what's happening right now, literally right now in the land of Israel. Guys, tune out all those fake news and lies, propaganda, everything that you hear on other channels. Delete those things and start listening to the truth of what's actually happening here from the land of Israel. Ari, Jeremy, it's been great to have you guys on the show. You guys have been a great inspiration. Jeremy, all of your hopeful messages. Ari, we're working on the positivity, but we do have to let everybody know what's actually happening. That's also a critical point. Everybody has to understand what's going down. Guys, until next week when we see you back here at the Israel Guys.